Welcome, welcome, welcome. Such a delight and an honor to have you here today. I want to be the first to welcome you to the Justice Department's 60th anniversary of Gideon versus Wainwright reception hosted by the Office for Access to Justice. We hope that you had an opportunity to view the original handwritten Gideon petition here at the front, but if you haven't seen it yet, you'll have some time to do so at the end. I now have the honor and privilege to introduce the 86th Attorney General of the United States, Merrick B. Garland. Attorney General Garland, please hold your applause. Attorney General Garland has dedicated much of his career to public service, and as part of that work, he has seen the criminal legal system from many perspectives. He has served in various career and non-career roles at the Justice Department, including as Special Assistant to the Attorney General, as Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Criminal Division, and as Assistant U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia. He served as a federal judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit for over 20 years, as chair of the Executive Committee of the Judicial Conference, and for the past 2 years as your Attorney General. In his current role, he oversees over 100,000 Justice Department lawyers and employees charged with enforcing the nation's laws and protections of the Constitution, including the right to counsel recognized in Gideon. Under his leadership, the department is dedicated to upholding the rule of law, keeping our country safe, and protecting the civil rights of all Americans. Attorney General Garland has also demonstrated a significant commitment to access to justice throughout his career and in his current role as the nation's chief law enforcement officer. Under his leadership, the Office for Access to Justice was reestablished, and it has grown and developed strong initiatives and programs because of his support. Attorney General Garland, we are delighted to have you here today to provide opening keynote remarks. Please join me in welcoming the Attorney General.
This is the first time I discovered the advantage of having a standing room crowd. It looks like you're giving me a standing ovation. Thank you very much. And I guess anybody who doesn't like it will have to sit down. So, all right. So good afternoon. Much of what I'm going to say today, I said yesterday at another event honoring the anniversary of Gideon, but this is important enough, I think, to say twice. We are here today because this weekend marks 60 years since Gideon versus Wainwright held that, quote, any person hauled into court who is too poor to hire a lawyer cannot be assured a fair trial unless counsel is provided for him. Just to describe the experience of Clarence Earl Gideon before his case reached the Supreme Court is to recall how different the American justice system was before the decision in his case. Gideon was charged with breaking and entering a pool hall. Without funds and with only an 8th grade education, he asked that the judge appoint a lawyer for him. When his request was denied, Gideon endeavored to represent himself. As Justice Black's opinion for the court recounted, Gideon, quote, conducted his defense about as well as could be expected from a layman. He made an opening statement to the jury, cross-examined the state's witnesses, and made a short closing argument. The jury soon returned a guilty verdict, and Gideon was sentenced to 5 years in state prison. After the Supreme Court reversed the judgment, however, the case was retried. This time, Gideon was represented by a local defense attorney, and he was acquitted. At every stage of my career, as a criminal defense attorney, prosecutor, judge, and now our nation's chief law enforcement officer, I have seen the truth of what Justice Black wrote in Gideon, quote, lawyers in criminal courts are necessities, not luxuries. Without capable criminal defense attorneys, defendants cannot understand the true scope of their rights at each stage of the criminal process. Prosecutors cannot learn of errors in their factual assumptions or legal analysis that could lead them to seek different resolutions. Jurors cannot hear the full stories needed to fairly adjudicate cases, and judges cannot hear the full legal arguments needed to guide their decisions. Criminal defense attorneys put the government's case to the test. In so doing, they make every part of our system fairer, more equal, and more just. But the Gideon decision did more than just help ensure justice in individual cases. With its decision in Gideon, the Supreme Court transformed the American legal system by renewing the foundational promise of equal justice under law. It reaffirmed that the law protects all of us, the poor as well as the rich, the powerless as well as the powerful. In so doing, it reaffirmed this country's commitment to the rule of law. And trust in the rule of law is what holds American democracy together. That trust requires not only that justice be done, but that it be seen to be done. And only the presence of counsel zealously defending their clients' rights can ensure public confidence in the legitimacy of judicial proceedings, regardless of their outcome. There is still so much more work to be done to make the promise of Gideon real. That work demands enormous efforts from the legal community. Most of all, it makes enormous demands on those lawyers, like many in this room today, who serve as public defenders, Criminal Justice Act attorneys, pro bono lawyers, and appointed counsel of every kind. Our justice system would be no different than it was before Gideon if tens of thousands of lawyers had not stood up and continued to stand up to take on the calling of public defense. Your work is essential not only to your clients, but to the functioning of our judicial system. I know that our system does not treat you accordingly. However much we at the Justice Department complain, and rightly so, about our limited resources, I know full well that yours are far more limited. I know that public defense remains drastically underfunded. I know that public defenders' offices are suffering serious recruitment and retention problems that only worsened during the COVID-19 pandemic. I know that you often carry staggering caseloads, and that your staff and investigative resources are insufficient, to say nothing of your financial compensation. I also know that the pressure on criminal defense attorneys is enormous. There is no small case when someone's liberty is at stake. The Justice Department recognizes the urgency and seriousness of these challenges, and we are committed to doing all that we can to support our colleagues who have devoted their careers to public defense. 1 year after Gideon, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy announced the creation of an Office of Criminal Justice within the Justice Department, focused on the provision of counsel for the poor. In doing so, he said, quote, "It must be our purpose in government to ensure that the department over which I preside is more than a department of prosecution, and is in fact a department of justice." It is with that same conviction that I announced the restoration of a standalone Office for Access to Justice within the department in 2021, and it is why I asked Rachel Rossi, a former public defender, to lead it. Our Office for Access to Justice is working closely with those of you on the front lines to identify and address the most urgent criminal and civil needs in communities across America. Over the past few weeks, department officials have crisscrossed the country to hear from public defense leaders on the ground. Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta will discuss those efforts soon in much greater detail. Like the attorneys generals who came before me, I begin every day by walking through a rotunda outside my office, where these words are inscribed: "The United States wins its point whenever justice is done its citizens in the courts. The message, of course, is that this is true regardless of whether the outcome is the one that the government favors. This is what distinguishes our justice system from those of many other countries. And it is what distinguishes our Justice Department from the law enforcement agencies of many other countries. We are responsible not only for enforcing the law, but for upholding the rule of law. We are responsible for protecting civil rights and for pursuing justice for all Americans. And justice demands more than good prosecutors and good judges. It demands meaningful access to counsel for the accused, including those who cannot afford attorneys. To provide that access and to reaffirm the kind of faith and law upon which our democracy depends, public defender offices need more resources. Our nation needs more lawyers to answer the call of public service by providing criminal defense for those who cannot afford it. And as a legal community, we need to recognize and reaffirm the necessity and the nobility of the public defense profession. When I was a law student, one of my mentors was John Hart Ely. Although he was recognized as one of the foremost legal scholars in the country, Ely emphasized that the thing he was most proud of was the work he did on the Gideon brief when he was a summer associate at Arnold Fortis and Porter in 1962. No doubt that influenced my own subsequent decision to join the same law firm. The firm's then senior partner was Abe Crash, who had supervised Ely and worked with Abe Fortis on the Gideon argument. Abe Crash never failed to emphasize to every new lawyer that Clarence Earl Gideon was the most important client the firm had ever had. Mr. Crash is with us today. He's 95 years old. John Ely and Abe Crash knew that the integrity of the American criminal justice system depends upon effective representation for indigent defendants. They knew that there are few things more meaningful and more honorable than applying one's talent, experience, and education to representing another person before the state, no matter what that person is accused of having done. And they knew that the impact of Gideon would be felt for generations. And they knew that fulfilling the promise of Gideon would require each generation of our country's lawyers to take up its important cause. The Justice Department is proud to stand with the public defenders and criminal defense attorneys in this room and across the country who are doing just that. Thank you all for everything you do.
Thank you, Attorney General Garland. It is now my pleasure to introduce the 19th Associate Attorney General of the United States, Vanita Gupta. Associate Attorney General Gupta previously served as the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, the nation's oldest and largest coalition of nonpartisan civil rights organizations in this country. Before that, she served as the head of the Department's Civil Rights Division from 2014 to 2017. Prior to her tenure leading the Civil Rights Division, Associate Attorney General Gupta served as the Deputy Legal Director and Director of the Center for Justice at the American Civil Liberties Union. In addition to managing litigation, Associate Attorney General Gupta created and led the ACLU's Smart Justice campaign, aimed at promoting bipartisan justice reform while keeping communities safe. She began her legal career as an attorney at the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. And having worked for Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta in my former role, I can say from firsthand observation that she pursues her work with a firm dedication and commitment to civil rights and justice for the most vulnerable. I'll now turn to Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta.
It is so great to see you, and I've got to see some old and dear friends that I haven't seen in quite a while. And I have to say, just before I start, that I am grateful that you all showed up at 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, but it doesn't surprise me at all. But it's so good to be in community with all of you, so thank you for coming and being here today with us at the Justice Department. Thank you, Rachel Rossi, for the introduction, but most importantly, for your leadership of our Office for Access to Justice, particularly given your own background as a public defender and lifelong champion of civil rights. I don't think a year ago we would have imagined being able to be in this place and doing this work with the kind of vigor that we are, and I'm grateful to you and to your team for doing everything you're doing. So thank you, and I think you deserve your own round of applause. I am very grateful to work with Attorney General Garland every day. His powerful remarks are just a smidge of the demonstration of his very strong and demonstrated commitment to expanding access to justice. He asks about these issues all the time. He is committed to them, and it was really important that he was able to speak at the NLADA yesterday as well to mark the 60th anniversary. And I want to acknowledge an incredibly special guest. We are so honored to have Abe Crash here today. It is so meaningful to us that we can honor that history and the doors that you helped open and the legal landscape that you helped change. Thank you again for being here today. And last, but perhaps most importantly, I want to thank all of you in this room. Many of you I have worked alongside with for years. Many of you have been working for many decades on these issues, but you have been working so hard every day to make the promise and protections of the Sixth Amendment real for your clients. Without adequately trained, well-resourced, and available indigent defense, our judicial system cannot function fairly. Every day, defenders answer this call with compassion, with resilience, with commitment, and often, and too often, with too few resources and in the face of daunting challenges. In 1963, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy said that because of Gideon, the whole course of American legal history has been changed. Gideon wasn't just a sea change. It was a promise to build a better, fairer system of justice. And 60 years later, as we take stock of our record to deliver on that promise, we see all too well how much work there is left to do. Some of you may know that I began my legal career at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and my first set of cases involved representing men and women accused of crimes who could not afford to pay for their lawyers. In 2001, when I was doing this work, many states didn't have institutional public defender offices, and unfortunately, too many parts of our country still don't today. Public defenders are overworked and undervalued, and many of you handle crushing caseloads with insufficient resources, and you do it with grit and determination, and you do it with zeal. It doesn't have to be that way, and it should matter to all of us that it still is. Defending those accused of crimes is not just a nice thing to do, it is a constitutional requirement. That constitutional requirement helps ensure fairness and legitimacy. And for that reason, every actor in the criminal justice system should be invested in the work of public defenders. Over the past 2 weeks, the Justice Department's Office of Access to Justice joined by senior officials from across the department, commemorated the 60th anniversary of Gideon by lifting up the right to counsel, celebrating the importance of public defenders, and highlighting important issues and challenges in our criminal justice system through a historic National Public Defense Day tour. The tour stopped in Miami, Florida, Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Muskogee Creek Nation, Nashville, Tennessee, Las Vegas, Nevada, and Des Moines, Iowa. Members of the Justice Department leadership joined Director Rossi at each of these stops, including the Deputy Attorney General, Lisa Monaco, Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division, Kenneth Polite, and Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Justice Programs, Amy Solomon. And I joined Director Rossi just earlier this week in Iowa. At these tour stops, we met with local public defenders and others and discussed elevating public defense as a career path, expanding racial equity, promoting holistic defense models, supporting the unique issues faced in tribal and rural communities, access to counsel and pretrial detention, and much more. In Des Moines, we talked with public defenders and contract attorneys who handle court-appointed cases about the unique challenges for indigent defense attorneys in rural areas. Iowa, like many jurisdictions, relies heavily on contract attorneys to represent indigent clients. But according to the Iowa Bar Association, the number of available contract attorneys has actually dropped 50% since 2014. And that shortage leads to court delays for indigent criminal defendants, almost a third of whom are juveniles. Yet in spite of these challenges, the individuals I met in Iowa, including Iowa State Public Defender Jeff Wright and Supreme Court Justice Matthew McDermott, demonstrated an unwavering commitment to providing Iowans with the legal services they need and deserve. As we head into National Public Defense Day, I am here to say that the Justice Department stands with you in facing these challenges. And beyond those words are concrete steps that the department is taking on issues that are important to all of you and all of us. Over the course of our tour, the department announced a number of deliverables. In Miami, the Deputy Attorney General announced that the Bureau of Prisons and the Access to Justice program are conducting a comprehensive review of access to counsel in BOP's pretrial facilities. In Las Vegas, the Criminal Division and ATJ announced a partnership to examine overseas legal defense issues, specifically through an upcoming visit to Ghana's Legal Aid Commission and the Commission's Public Defender Division. We also announced that ATJ is launching a series of visits with law schools across the country to promote public defense as a career. In Nashville, the Office of Justice Programs and ATJ issued a joint letter to remind and encourage state administering agencies of the Burn JAG funds that federal grant funding can be used to support public defense. In Des Moines, I announced that ATJ has established a position focused solely on building support for and collaborations with the state and local public defense community. With a dedicated attorney focused on state and local public defense, ATJ will promote expanded resources for public defense, amplify the voices of defenders, and reinvigorate a Sixth Amendment statement of interest practice to protect federal interests in right to counsel issues. We hope that the department's tour and today's event helps shine a spotlight on some of the work that you all are doing day in and day out, as well as the collective work that we have ahead. So let me just say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything that you do to expand access to justice and to fulfill the great promise of Gideon. Thank you.
Thank you, Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta. We are now going to watch a short video, and then we will conclude with our final speaker after the video.
The 60th anniversary of Gideon is really a great opportunity for us to refocus on the critical role that public defenders play in realizing equal justice in America.
When I walked into that courtroom and I looked over and I saw my public defender there, my public defender smiled at me for a minute. And in that brief moment, I thought, I'm not going to fall apart. I'm going to do this. And somebody is there that's other than me.
The public defender that assisted me in my first part of my prison journey was a great man. He was just very humble, very welcoming, always had a smile, and he was really there to educate me because I was a child. It was just language that I didn't understand.
Public defenders are many things. Public defenders are counselors. At the most terrifying stage of many people's lives, public defenders, when they're doing their job well, are there to make sure they understand the path ahead of them. They understand their different options, and they understand how to advise people to make decisions that are best for them.
So to me, public defenders are superheroes. They are the people that show up in sort of the front line of battles in courtrooms across the country. They represent clients who have every reason to distrust them. They often have unbelievably massive caseloads. They have a lack of resources. They are representing people that a good piece of society believes are unworthy. They are representing people at the worst part of their lives, and they're doing all of it while being paid a minuscule amount of money for the amount of work that they're doing, and often being subjected to a lot of unpleasantries, to say it nicely, from different forms that they're appearing in front of. And so that's why every day we have to really, really be in awe of the public defenders who keep showing up, who keep pushing through, who keep having to endure all of that and manage to show up with the brilliance and the grace and the excellence that they do in courtrooms across the country.
But I find that it is deeply meaningful work and meaningful on a human level in a way that I think a lot of legal work simply isn't.
At the core of it, when somebody asks me what I do, tell them, yes, I'm a public defender, which is a type of criminal defense attorney. But at the core, I'm an educator. I educate opposing counsel, I educate the judge, I educate the client, educate the client's family members and friends, educate the public, and if needed, if we go to trial, I educate the jury.
I think what the best public defenders do is refuse to allow a system to process people as things.
Public defenders are storytellers. It is through public defenders that everyone else in the criminal justice system learns the whole story of the people their decisions impact. Without public defenders, even the most egalitarian-minded judges and prosecutors can only respond to the incidents laid out in a police report.
You are a social worker because you're literally trying to triage and figure out everything that's going on with your clients. I remember sort of thinking that the case would be the number one priority for conversation between me and my client. And as I got into the work, I realized that sometimes the case is the last thing, because we're having conversations about housing and when they're going to leave. When is the last time they had something to eat? When is the last time they've been to a doctor? Do they even know where to go and get their driver's license? Then they add in the family dynamic, having to answer all the questions for them.
I think it's really important for the public defenders to be involved with the client that they're serving's family, because when someone goes to jail, the whole family is impacted. So for me, it was more of keeping me aware of what was going on and helping me understand in a way that I could understand.
You know, again, we never give public defenders enough credit for all that they do in a day and then still come home and try to lead regular lives.
I think that when I think of the public defender right now, I think of them in terms of partner, not just in justice when it comes to sentencing, but justice into the work that I do around policy, that they are allies and that they are, in a lot of cases, sort of unsung heroes. They are the fighters.
I love being a public defender because I have the opportunity to change lives. I tell my clients, when it's the last time I'm gonna see them, I tell them, I hope I never see you again. And they smile because they understand what I mean.
And so I think that every day we win just by being there for our clients, by forging a real connection with them, by showing empathy, by trying to understand how they wound up where they did, and by appreciating that many of them are really fearless, really creative, really adaptive people who often deserve to be celebrated.
It is now my pleasure and honor to introduce Juval Scott. Juval Scott is the federal public defender for the Western District of Virginia, which has 3 offices in Roanoke, Charlottesville, and Abingdon. Prior to her appointment as federal public defender, she was an attorney advisor with the training division of the Defender Services Office in Washington, D.C. Before joining the training division, she was an assistant federal defender in the Milwaukee office of the Federal Defender Service of Wisconsin and with the Indiana Federal Community Defenders in Indianapolis. Federal Defender Scott also taught criminal procedure adjudication as an adjunct professor at the Washington and Lee School of Law. She regularly teaches at local CJA panel trainings and programs sponsored by the Defender Services Office Training Division, as well as the National Criminal Defense College, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers and its state affiliates, and other organizations dedicated to criminal legal and reform issues. I am now honored to turn it over to Federal Defender Juval Scott.
Good evening, and thank you to Attorney General Garland, Associate Attorney General Gupta, Director Rossi, for inviting me to take part in today's celebration. Almost 100 years ago in 1932, Clarence Gideon sat in a Florida prison and crafted a handwritten petition asking the Supreme Court to help. He asked the Supreme Court to acknowledge that the trial where he represented himself simply wasn't fair. He said he deserved a lawyer. 60 years ago tomorrow, the Supreme Court agreed that Mr. Gideon was entitled to counsel. And on retrial, this time with a lawyer, he was acquitted. Today, I am grateful to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Supreme Court's watershed decision, finding the right to counsel, Gideon versus Wainwright, with each of you. 1 year after Gideon was decided, Congress passed the Criminal Justice Act, which guaranteed counsel for the indigent accused in federal court. The federal defender structure we know today was ultimately formed. And today, I proudly serve as one of 82 federal public defenders, and as a member of this country's amazing public defense community. The public defense community's work is made better with the support of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, the National Criminal Defense College, Gideon's Promise, the National Association for Public Defense, the Sentencing Project, National Legal Aid and Defender Association, the Innocence Project, the Marshall Project, the Brennan Center for Justice, and too many other organizations engaged in meaningful reform and policy work to list here. You know who you are. Public defenders and criminal defense attorneys who accept appointed cases make the criminal legal system better. The vast expansion of criminal laws, particularly in the drug context, created the need for competent, zealous counsel to ensure the principles enshrined in our Constitution were protected. And even before Gideon and the CJA, the Justice Department understood the need and advocated for the establishment of public defender offices. Today, public defenders do more than ensure Sixth Amendment rights. Public defenders advance racial justice by challenging jury compositions, tirelessly working to ensure that the accused have people of color serving and that people of color get to serve on juries. Public defenders challenge violations of the Fourth Amendment, many of which are related to over-policing in communities of color, and traffic stops and pat-down searches seemingly reserved for people of color. Public defenders work tirelessly to eradicate bail practices that disproportionately detain poor people and people of color while they lose their livelihoods, homes, and families. Public defenders step into the well of the courtroom and tell their clients' stories to juries, reminding them that being accused is not the same as being guilty, and that the burden is the government's to bear, not theirs. Public defenders learn the nuances and intricacies of their clients' lives to persuade courts to hand down sentences that are fair, just, and not overly punitive, and that don't contribute to this country's mass incarceration problem. They recognize that the overwhelmingly corruptive influences of addiction and mental illness on the lives of ordinary people matter. Public defenders also recognize the power of humanity and redemption. And when the global pandemic shut down the entire world, public defenders ignored their own safety and worked tirelessly to protect the vulnerable. Public defenders console and educate families, buy meals and bus tickets, find community resources to help their clients heal and recover. As my sister Heather Pinckney said in that video, we are the superheroes of this system. Gideon was rooted in the court's belief that the accused should receive a fair trial. But the work of defenders today is far more nuanced and demanding, and defenders need more resources to support and fulfill our growing obligations to our clients. Because so many public defender offices are underfunded, under-resourced, and overwhelmed, our constitutionally adversarial system of justice does not flourish as intended. And to truly allow the defense function to operate as intended, it must be independent. Though the discussion regarding the independence of federal defender offices has been widely discussed for more than 30 years, and yet another recommendation for independence was issued by the Cardone report in 2017, the Federal Public Defender Organization is anything but independent. So, as we celebrate the marvel that Gideon is on its 60th anniversary, let us also commit to finding ways we can better support our public defense system and fully effect Gideon's promise of a fair and just criminal legal system. Thank you.
Thank you, Juval. As we conclude today's program, on behalf of the Office for Access to Justice, I want to thank everyone who attended today. By your demonstration and your commitment to access to counsel and the Sixth Amendment, I especially want to thank the public defense professionals and advocates in the room who worked tirelessly to make the promises of Gideon real. We are also grateful to our leadership, Attorney General Garland, Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, who regrets she cannot be here today due to an unavoidable conflict, and Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta, who have all supported our office's growth and demonstrated commitment to the ideals of access to justice. Our office's mission is to break down the barriers to the promises and protections of our legal systems. We work to ensure that justice does not depend upon how much money you have, what language you speak, or who you are. A critical component of our office's mandate is to serve as the principal legal advisor to the department on the constitutional right to counsel and other rights under the Sixth Amendment. We work to support and uplift public defense as a core component of the Justice Department's mission to pursue equal justice under the law. As you heard from the associate tonight, our National Public Defense Day tour took us from Miami to Tulsa to the Muskogee Creek Nation to Las Vegas to Nashville and to Des Moines. Our priority was to highlight and uplift the voices of defenders across the country. In the weeks and months ahead, we will develop and issue a comprehensive report to better describe and amplify what we learned. But today I would like to leave you with just a few quotes that we heard from the defense community across the country. Quote, under-resourced and overworked. Quote, we are just treading water. Quote, I do this work because often I get to fight for people who've never had someone fight for them before. Quote, this is McDonald's lawyering. And quote, this is the best job in the world. We know that there is much more required to fully realize the promises of Gideon. Our office is dedicated to developing innovative solutions to support and improve public defense. We believe that it is possible to promote and expand resources and to elevate the prestige of the public defense profession so that we have an even brighter story to tell when we gather for the next anniversary of Gideon. Thank you to the Justice Department officials who joined our office on this cross-country tour, Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta, Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division, Kenneth Polite, Principal Deputy Attorney General for the Office of Justice Programs, Amy Solomon, and all of the United States attorneys in the districts that we visited. And finally, thank you to the staff of the Office for Access to Justice. Each and every one of the office's now 25 staff had some role in the planning and the executing of this month's celebratory events. But in particular, I want to thank Emmy Lopez, Brenda Otterman, Lauren Lambert, Robin Marr, and ATJ's Chief of Staff, Susan Inman, who have all worked tirelessly to honor public defense with humility and excellence. This concludes the 60th anniversary of Gideon program. Please continue to mingle, enjoy the refreshments, view the Gideon petition, and take photos at the Access to Justice Step and Repeat outside. ATJ staff will be available to help guide and assist you out of the building once you are ready. Thank you.